It is Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. That's Paul Domowitch, who contributes on JAKIBsports.com with his stat pack. About the Eagles this – oh, shoot. The Eagles aren't playing this week. I forgot. Just slipped my mind. Damo, I'm going to ask you to make a prediction to start today's show. Wednesday, Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman are going to take a podium together and answer questions from guys like John McMullen. They'll have certainly an opening statement, or they'll give their opinion and or information on certain things before they open it up for questions. Is there a chance? What's the percentage chance that they don't even mention Nick Sirianni's job status until they get to the questions? That they just power ahead and we've made coordinate changes and the end of the season wasn't good enough. We know we got to get that. They don't even broach the fact that Sirianni's job was discussed within the inner sanctum.
Now, do we know? I mean, is Howie supposed to be at this press conference?
Yes, Howie and Nick together.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be mentioned until it's asked, but they know it's going to be the first question asked.
Yeah, it is, and we'll see. And Howie will have to answer it for Nick, and then you get to see squirming. There's nothing better than podium squirming, as far as I'm concerned. So when we do hear from Howie Roseman, optimistic, pessimistic, best spin, attempt at humor, what are we going to get out of Howie?
A certain amount of optimism with a certain amount of admissions that they made mistakes that need to be corrected, and that they feel they'll be a contender again next year.
Boy, yeah, that's a tough sell. Well, it's not a tough sell to think they'll be a contender, depending on what you think contender is. They'll certainly be a contender for a playoff spot. Yeah. I don't know if they'll be in a position to be a Super Bowl contender again. We'll have to see how the personnel goes, but I don't know if you heard us talking in the opening segment at all, Damo. I look at this like you're straddling the fence, you're delaying the inevitable. This is a clear indication, unless you're buying that Nick Sirianni's involved with the coaching decisions moving forward, and I'm sure he'll get, he'll be involved in the sense he'll get to talk to the guys, but it seems to me they're going to say, all right, this is your defensive coordinator. And if it's not Jim Bob Cooter or Mike McCoy, that's really what you got to focus on, the offensive line. And if it's not a Sirianni guy, Frank Reich would be the most obvious. Don't know where Frank is and what he wants to do. But if it's not a Sirianni guy, that's a disaster waiting to happen, isn't it? You got a coach coaching for his job who has no power. Essentially, it's Jason Garrett without Jerry Jones.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, what's going on in Howie and Jeff's mind right now, as far as whether they think this guy is playing for his job, coaching for his job next year, or whether they're going to try to help him with people that they genuinely feel he can relate to and is comfortable with. I mean, let's just say defense, they bring in Ron Rivera. I mean,
Jeffrey's wife's golfing partner.
Exactly. He's the perfect defensive coordinator for them for a lot of reasons, including that he's very good. But does Nick feel he's a threat? Do they care if Nick feels he's a threat? Probably not. I mean, a guy like Ron Rivera has been around a long time. He's not going to be,
Yeah, he's a good dude. He's not going to be stabbing people.
Right. But, I mean, I've thought about guys like Clint Kubiak.
You're bringing the Kubiak Shanahan offense.
You go. So, I don't know. I don't think I think he's on double secret probation right now, so he doesn't really have a say in what's going to happen here. If they strongly believe in who they want to hire as the offensive and defensive coordinators, he'll say, okay, boss.
And, oh, by the way, last time the powers that be above the coach dictated the coaching staff, 2 years in, they were in the Super Bowl and won it with Doug Peterson, because I've heard from John McMullen too many times right here on the show. Doug came in and said, coaching staff, yeah, whatever you want, Howie. I'm good. You're giving me the big whistle. That's fine by me. Whatever you want to hand me as far as assistant coaches go. Yeah. And they made it work. So that's what Sirianni's going to be tasked with. He's going to have to make it work with the coaching staff being put together by
different timing, though. Different timing. Like I said, it's like the Kubler-Ross model. Instead of stages of grief, Damo, it's stages of coaching.
Yeah.
Well, the Eagles are at stage 4, which is scapegoating. Now, when Doug got to stage 4, it was over. That's where we are. When Doug was at stage 1, yeah, he was like, all right, Jim Schwartz, yeah, blah, blah, blah. That's a great co-head coach, great defensive coordinator, and they had some tremendous success. They're not in the same stage here. They're going backwards on Nick Sirianni. They're buttoning him. Yeah.
This is I mean, they have to go into all of this. and I'm guessing they're smart enough to realize this. They're going to be taking a step back next year before they can take 2 steps forward. I mean, they know how many people they've got to replace or upgrade, or especially on defense, and the things they need to change. I mean, I don't, no matter what they say on Wednesday about, we feel we can be a competitive team next year, and they can be a competitive team, but I mean, there's so much that Howie has to do right during the off season. Can he? I guess he's had, before the 2017 Super Bowl, everything he touched that off season turned to gold. So maybe he can do it again. But I mean, boy, there's just a lot of people they need to replace on defense. They've got some key moves they've got to make on offense. And then you're talking about 2 new coordinators. So,
well, so that's kind of my thing. Why not fire the coach just because you don't want to pay an extra $7 million? Why show the courage of your convictions? It's a disaster. You're changing both coordinators. You're going to voice new coordinators. Thanks, Jody. I'm using voice now. Just show the courage of your convictions.
Yeah.
Blow them out.
I mean, I think Jeffrey feels the guy deserves another chance. And B, he doesn't want to admit he made a mistake. I mean, a mistake that got them to the Super Bowl last year and the playoffs the last 3 years, but now he's not good enough.
Well, I want to make it clear. I don't agree with him. I think Nick Sirianni should be back, but I also think he should have some power if he's back. And it's trending, for me at least, in a negative direction. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. But it certainly seems like they're going in a negative direction to me.
It's going to be really interesting to listen to Nick tomorrow. I mean, I'm assuming since he still has his job, he's admitted, yeah, I made a lot of mistakes this year when he's talked to Nick and to Howie and Jeff, and that he's willing to make changes and let them guide him through this. Some areas where maybe Doug was like near the end of his rope, maybe he's not. He's willing, because I think he's willing to do whatever they tell him he should do right now.
All right, here's where I'm at with the whole power base for Nick Sirianni. How much has he really lost? Do we really believe that Sean Desai was purely his hire? That Howie Roseman didn't tee him up on a plate for Nick to say yes about? Howie went out and got him. Howie brought him into the interview process. Did Nick hire him, or did Nick say, all right, Howie, wink, wink, nod, nod, you like this Desai guy? Yeah, he's my defensive coordinator. Brian Johnson wasn't a Sirianni guy. Howie brought him in and said, what do you think about this guy for quarterback coach? Oh, okay. I guarantee you it was a Howie and Nick decision to elevate him to offensive coordinator. How much power has Sirianni really lost? I don't think he ever had the power. Yeah, Kevin Patullo. You want Kevin Patullo to be your offensive consultant, whatever. Yeah, they give him certain hirings just to add to his staff. But the key ones, the coordinators, whatever, I think they've been all Eagle hires, not Sirianni hires anyway. So how much has he really lost if he never had it to begin with?
Well, Shane certainly was. I mean, Shane was a Nick guy.
The Desai hire,
yeah.
I mean, it's not a cold call here. Vic Fangio was here all last season. So
Yeah.
this was a Vic Fangio hire, if anything. I mean,
Yep.
Vic said, this is the guy you want. He's my young protege. He's going to, you like my defense. This guy's going to, going to coach it. And he's, I think he's going to be a very successful coach. And I mean, Sean Desai, I mean, you go back to Sean McDermott, they fired him for reasons that had nothing to do with his ability, but he went on and became a terrific defensive coordinator and a head coach. So you can't, I'm not going to suggest they made a mistake with Sean Desai. Maybe he just wasn't ready for this situation, whatever. The mistake, the gross mistake was pulling the plug on his play calling and putting Matt Patricia in charge. And Matt Patricia was a Howie guy. I mean, Howie's relationship is why he's on this staff. I don't know, and that's where, whether Matt was forced on him, I would guess he was, but I would think that Nick thought, well, what's the harm? He's just going to be kind of hanging around as an advisor, sort of. And next thing you know,
and then he's called the plays.
Yeah. Now, offensively, I mean, Brian Johnson's promotion seemed like a no-brainer.
And by the way, I think that was more driven by Jeffrey and Howie not wanting to lose Brian Johnson than Nick. Nick probably would have at least interviewed some different people, at least considered some different people. I think that was put upon him as well. So I think a lot of this, they already have, and by they, I mean Howie and Jeffrey already have their fingerprints. To Jody's point, Shane was completely a Nick Sirianni hire.
Yeah.
I don't say that about Jonathan because they were going to hire him anyway, but he was completely fine with Jonathan Gannon. He was a Sirianni guy as well. But to me, the biggest problem is they're caught up in the scheme, the Fangio scheme, as you mentioned. They're chasing a scheme. When you're chasing a trend, you're behind. I think they have been behind. And I think that was a big mistake. And that's why they went with, as you mentioned, Sean Desai, because he's a direct Fangio disciple.
Yeah.
The new defensive coordinator, I assume, whether it's Ron Rivera or somebody else, is going to be given autonomy and saying, I don't care what you want to run, Nick. We tried that.
Yeah.
And that all of a sudden is different. And different, I guess, doesn't necessarily have to be bad. But at this stage, after you've won 67% of your games, after you've made the playoffs 3 consecutive times, these are rare things in the NFL, as you know, Damo. You deserve more. You do. And if I'm Nick Sirianni and I go home to South Jersey every night and I finally turn off the light, I go, man, these bleeping bleeps. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't.
Then here's what I would say to Nick Sirianni if that's the case. Do a Doug Peterson. Tell him no. Say no. If either you let me make my coaching.
But to be honest, I would have done that because, and people could say, well, you don't want to walk away from $7 million. Well, I just made $21 million. So I have some, in theory, Nick's got a lot of kids, but I think he's still got some money in the bank. And, oh, by the way, somebody else is going to hire this guy right away because other people aren't insane and think 667 and 3 playoff berths aren't accomplishments. Here in Philadelphia, they're considered disappointments because of the expectations. Everywhere else, that's pretty damn good. Guys, it's not like this guy's going to have trouble getting another job. I would have Doug Peterson the Eagles. I would have said, you know what? No, But, that's up to Nick, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, and it had nothing to do with money. I mean, there are only 32 of these jobs in the league, and you better be pretty confident you're going to get another one sometime.
If I'm Nick, I'm very confident I'm getting another. Yeah. May take a year, because of the timing.
See, I'm not. I would think it might take more than a year if he just walked away. I wasn't even sure Doug was going to get another chance. It just, I mean, he did not get a lot of interviews until Jacksonville finally came around and brought him down. And, you know, I mean, it made sense that, you know, I mean, I didn't think it would be as difficult, but you sit out a year. Sometimes people forget you. So, you know, I can't see Nick doing that. I mean, he knows he made mistakes last year.
Oh, sure. I'm not. He's made a ton of mistakes,
Yeah.
but I think if you look at the step back and get off the emotion of the collapse, and it was a collapse, it was ugly. Everything about it was ugly. I think I just said, I think he did a terrible job with the defense, a terrible job. And the Patricia decision, I think people that do want Nick fired, that's your bullet point. That's your number one. Forget about the offense. That was such a disastrous decision.
Yeah.
And then you can get to the offense and all the issues and not being able to adjust and all tons of mistakes. But
if we all acknowledge that was the biggest mistake, and we all do, that I think is a big reason why Sirianni's still here. Because you know who knows they made that decision? Jeffrey and Howie. And we still don't know 100%, but with every passing day, I become more sure in my own mind that was foisted upon him by Howie Roseman and by Jeff Lurie that he had to make Patricia the play caller. If they know they did that to him, and that was the biggest domino that fell all year long, you gonna make Sirianni pay the price for that?
I tend to agree with you, Jody. I mean, I think the Patricia move was more them than him, which is why I find more as disastrous as that was. My concerns with Nick were the lack of changes he made, the lack of adjustments he made offensively. He's an offensive coach, and he knew teams were going to adjust to his offense last year. And there was a certain amount of arrogance over the success they had the year before that he figured, bring it on. We're ready for it. We can handle anything you throw at us. And they couldn't because they didn't make the adjustments to deal with what defenses did against them.
I think that's a fair critique of the coach.
I agree with that. But from the offensive perspective, and I can't tell you how many times Nick Sirianni has phrased it in this framework. This is my offense. As long as I'm here, it's going to be my offense. Whether it's Shane, Brian, Kevin, Mike McCoy, Jim Bob Cooter, Frank Reich, it's going to be Nick Sirianni's offense. If it's not Nick Sirianni's offense completely, how does that not create a disconnect? Not saying it should be, but that's been his belief. And he constantly says, no matter who's calling the plays, this is my offense. If all of a sudden it isn't his offense, as I said, then you have Jason Garrett clapping on the sidelines. What are you doing? You're the game management coach. You're the game management specialist. That's a concern from my perspective, because I don't think it's sustainable when you have that kind of situation with a head coach who doesn't believe, because he believes in himself, whether he should or shouldn't, that's a separate conversation. But he believes in himself, and then you're saying, we're going to scrap your offense and go to insert name.
Well, this is what I know. I mean, he knows he made enough mistakes that no matter who was his offensive coordinator last year, I guarantee you we're going to see a couple noticeable different things. There's going to be a lot more motion. I mean, whether he puts it in or the coordinator he hires puts it in, and they're going to figure out, hey, site adjustments really work against blitzes sometimes. I mean, they're going to have a plan for how to deal with blitzes, and they're going to make sure that Jalen understands it and take it from there. I mean, there are going to be changes regardless of who puts them in, whether it's his offensive coordinator that he hires or him.
Here's where I think keeping Sirianni, you can make the argument for doing just that. What changed on the offense this year? Dama, your critique was on point. Shame on Nick. He came in with a little too much bravado about my offense, and my offense got us to the Super Bowl. And when other teams started doing other things against him, he didn't have an answer. There was no plan B. So you're right. Shame on him for that. But it was Isaac Seumalo The removal of Isaac Seumalo is the reason the line fell apart.
He's a good player, Isaac, by the way.
He's a solid player. How much of a drop off between Isaac Seumalo and Cam Jerkin? Certainly there was some, but to bring the offense crumbling down like it was, I don't think so. Wide receivers the same, tight end the same. Add Swift, subtract Miles Sanders. That's pretty much even as far as I'm concerned. What was the only change on offense? Brian Johnson calling the plays. Otherwise, it was the same offense that went to the Super Bowl the year before. I think the Eagles are hanging their hat on. Yeah, Brian Johnson did a lousy job of calling the plays, despite the fact, and this is where Sirianni really actually does have a problem. He proved himself to be a liar this year. So anytime Nick says anything going forward, I'm going to have to scratch my chin and go, all right, is that the truth? Or is he just telling us what we need to hear? Is that the truth? Or he's just telling his bosses what they need to hear? I don't know how much I trust the guy and what he says anymore. He said it was his offense. Maybe he did give Brian Johnson hands off, and he just did a lousy job calling plays, Damo. Is that possible?
Yeah, I guess. I see two things with regard to Brian Johnson. One, if he had to navigate within the construction of this offense, and that's Nick's offense. So, my problem with Brian this year was he and the quarterback, who he's known since he was 4 years old, could not get on the same page. And I just don't understand how that could happen, except that their relationship changed when he went from quarterback's coach, which is kind of like a buddy, an advisor, to an offensive coordinator who's now like, you do this is going to work, you run it. And I don't think Jalen ever believed a lot of that. Certainly as the season went along and things weren't working, he was making changes on his own. Secondly, if Nick had a problem at any point, why didn't he just take over the play calling duties?
Oh, I suggested it a couple times during the year that he should go down that road, specifically after he pushed Patricia to the press box.
Yeah.
Well, now be a real man. Step up and take over the play calling.
I mean, Andy Reid did, over the course of his career, has taken the play calling duties and given them back.
Yeah, he'll do it in game. He'll give them a quarter.
And there's been no hard feelings, especially with a young guy.
No.
Why didn't he do that? I don't know. There are so many questions that don't have answers in this whole thing, including like, who do we blame? Whether Howie made him do things, whether Jeff made him do. I mean, we're not going to get answers tomorrow either, because it's going to be, this is a
no, we're not.
This is a collaboration thing. We're both at fault, or we're both to blame.
Your old colleague, Jeff McClain, who is going to be on with us in the second hour, Damo, confirms Derek Gunn's report that Brian Johnson will not be returning, but also says Jim Bob Cooter won't be among the top candidates. So some extra news from Jeff that we'll talk about in a few minutes, but there's another indication of, that's a Nick guy, Jim Bob Cooter. Maybe they're going in a different direction. Now, we've been talking about the coaches, understandably so, but you mentioned the quarterback. The quarterback's a part of this. The quarterback's relationship with Brian Johnson, sometimes I think it was overblown. I mean, you're right. People bring that up. It's not like Brian Johnson was hanging out with Jalen Hurts when he was 4. He met him. You're a high school kid. You're not paying attention to a 4-year-old. You meet him at practice, you tap him on the head, and you move on. His recruiting of Jalen Hurts, he didn't get him either time. He recruited him, but he lost.
Yeah.
So sometimes I think that was overblown, and maybe he's fine with it, but then again, maybe he's not fine with it. Does this open up a whole can of worms with the quarterback who's having the first time in his life he's had a downgrade? People talked about it all the time. He's improved. All of a sudden, you have the first down tick, and now you're messing with his coaches and the guys who are advising him. How does it work with the quarterback? I think everybody's kind of glossing over that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't know. We don't know what Jalen's thinking right now. He certainly last week was fine with Brian coming back. He endorsed him along with Nick. Part of me wonders if Brian's firing, and I made reference earlier to Sean McDermott's leaving. If you were, you guys remember how it went. They just felt that he was under Jim Johnson's shadow at the time. Jim had passed.
Yeah.
But that he just couldn't handle the pressures. And I'm wondering if they're thinking, this guy is right now, he is the scapegoat of the entire Eagles nation. They're blaming him for everything. Maybe he needs to go somewhere else and get a fresh start, and we need to find a new offensive coordinator. Maybe that's how they look at this, rather than, we need to make a change here because Brian Johnson's not good enough. I don't know. Again, that's a question and an answer we won't get for a while. But, you saw a situation with Sean McDermott when he got fired. Andy went out and helped him get another job. He called Ron Rivera up and said, hire him as your defensive coordinator. And Ron did, and the rest is history. So I don't know how, I've got to believe this. I can't believe they would just say to, the Jalen would be firm on wanting Brian back, and them saying, sorry, buddy, we don't care how much we're paying you as quarterback. We need to make a change here. So I've got to believe that he's on board to some degree, or feels this is not his fight. Because it's a difficult. You don't want to aggravate Jalen Hurts, no matter how poorly he played this season, because you're paying him $55 million a year.
Yeah.
Agreed, but he also is coming from a down year. He's going to have a lesser season working with Brian Johnson. Go, don't you dare fire my friend as the offense coordinator. If I were Howie Roseman or Jeff Lurie, I'm not being dictated to by a guy who's just had the worst year of his career.
Well, I don't think
that's one where I'm willing to take a stance. If I'm Jeff Lurie, I can take whatever damn steps I want. It's my team. Yeah, I'm taking a stance on that one. I'm not going to be dictated to by a quarterback who had his worst year ever.
That's why I don't think that happened. I really think a part of Jalen, they told Jalen, listen, Jalen knows that there were times when he, a lot of times this year when he didn't agree with the play calling, with what Brian was telling him. So maybe he, I would have to believe he's accepted that it's better if Brian goes somewhere else. Because you're right. I don't think he'd draw a line here, but I think they would be reluctant to get rid of him if he expressed strong desire to continue to work for Brian.
You think Brian Johnson gets a coordinator position with another team in the league this year, or you think he's got to go back to quarterback coach?
Good question. Depends on what's open. I would say yes, he gets another job. He may want to go back to college. Who knows? He had a couple of head coaching opportunities before he took the QB job here. Boise State and South Carolina both had him on their short list when they were looking for head coaches. So maybe he's decided, that's where I belong. I don't know. We'll find out.
At P Damo, make sure you follow Damo on X, Twitter, 33rd Football Team. You can read them there as well. WBCB, his show with Paul Jalowitz. You can listen to him there all over the place. Retirement does not agree with Paul Domowitch. You got a lot of stuff, a lot of irons in the fire. This is something nobody brings up, and for good reason. Typically, it certainly seems like Howie Roseman is very entrenched in his job after the whole Chip Kelly debacle, but he did it once. Could he do it again? Is Howie Roseman on the clock as well as Nick Sirianni?
He is not. Their relationship is more solid than any of Jeffrey's marriages.
Okay. I tried. He did it to Joe. He was once very close with Joe. He put Howie on the other side of the building. You never know.
When that relationship may become threatened is Julian, his son.
Julian,
is getting older and getting wiser. And
Alec Hallaby sits at the
I don't think he's ever going to be considered a football operations guy, but he's a guy that, I mean, Jeffrey has always needed someone to bounce things off of, to somebody next to him when it was either Joe at one time or for the last many years, Howie. When Julian fills that role, that's when Howie needs to be a little bit concerned about his job.
Do either of you guys think there was any chance Alec Calabi was leaving the organization? He was mentioned, and he might have even gotten interviews to talk to other teams about their general manager position.
Yeah, he got a couple of interviews. He got a second interview in Carolina, but they went with Dan Morgan, the ex-great linebacker.
How many people did they have second interviews with? About 14?
No, not with
what have they done other than interview candidates for head coach and general manager in the last 2 weeks?
They cut it to like 4 or 5 per GM, and he was one of the 5. But yeah, he's young. He also, like how he came up in a non-traditional fashion, so people hold that against him.
He's an analytics guy.
Yeah. Smart guy, Ivy League. Yeah, he's Howie never gave out the assistant GM title before he gave it to Alec and John Ferrari as well. People forget that. So
speaking of dictating terms, I think Howie was told that one. We've speculated on a bunch of Howie dictating terms to Sirianni today. Oh, I think that was dictated to Howie. You're going to name an assistant general manager or 2, and you're going to do so this offseason. And that's why that happened. All right. Even though I know you haven't had a chance to consult with Alex Alabi for the analytics of the upcoming championship games, what do you like, Damo? Are we looking at the 2-1 seed, San Francisco and Baltimore? Do you give the Chiefs a chance, proving they can win a road playoff game? Is the magic of the Lions going to continue? Who's in the Super Bowl?
I think Harbaugh beats his old mentor. I think Baltimore's in, and I think San Francisco's in, and I think Baltimore wins it all.
All right, so we're looking at a Ravens and 49ers rematch from years ago. Always a pleasure, Damo. Thank you very much for jumping in with us today. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks,
Domowitch 3013, JAKIBSports.com. Our bud who off. Well, we'll get him on next week. The Hall of Fame conversation has to happen at some point.
Oh, yeah.
I've had a couple of guys.
There's so much to talk about, though.
It's right. There's so much Eagles stuff. We didn't get into it. Who was it? Oh, yesterday when we had our guest talking about Eric Allen. That conversation needs to be had. And Damo's the guy who's going to present him. I've been screaming for 20 years now, Eric Allen is a Hall of Famer. And he is closer to potential induction than ever before. We'll certainly have Damo on again next week and talk about the upcoming debate as to who does or doesn't get in. All right, he's McMullen. I'm McDonald. You got Mac Birds 365. John just told you, Jeff McLean's going to join us coming up in just over 20 minutes from now. He's already doing some reporting today. No Jim Bob Cooter. Oh, I'm cut to the quick that Jim Bob Cooter isn't going to be the
Bob. No Jim Bob. No Jim Bob. No Tommy Reese, by the way, who got a job in Cleveland, the ex-Alabama Notre Dame offensive coordinator, quarterback. He's very close with Nick Sirianni. So the signs are pointing to, Frank Reich's a little bit different because I think that would be approved by Jeffrey and Howie. So maybe they can go that direction. But again, I don't know where Frank wants to go as a former head coach. Maybe that's a little bit different, but the small list of obvious Sirianni guys, 2 are already off. Mike McCoy is another one, who I believe is Doug's passing game coordinator, quarterbacks coach right now. He's a Nick Sirianni guy. Other than that, those 4 guys, and 2 of them are already off the board. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it will be. And it's funny that I look at the sheet today. Show, and I'm 100% positive this is the right number. Show number 686 you and I have done together. Today is show 686. It's funny what you remember. I remember the day you're telling the story about Jim Bob Cooter down at the Eagles. Oh, it's Jim Bob Cooter. What are you talking about? Jody, I'm telling you what happened yesterday at the media session. They just kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody. So, yeah, he's been a Sirianni guy for a while. according to Jeff McClain, and we'll get more details on that from Jeff when he joins us coming up just about 20 minutes from now. Doesn't look like Jim Bob Cooter is going to be the offensive coordinator for the Eagles next year. Who will be? McMullen and I will come back and dive more into that next here on Birds 365.